Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's celebration. We think we have a great program lined up for you and that you'll really enjoy it. But before we get started, I want to thank people who helped make this celebration special. In particular, I want to thank our pro bono team, Cindy Cuesta, who's the director of our pro bono program, Nisha Thompson, Miriam Martinez, Evelyn Crespo, and Lizette Montalvo. They not only put together a great program tonight, but they do a great job with our pro bono program throughout the year. I also want to thank Lynette Marrero for putting together our pre-event cocktail mixing session. I hope everybody who participated really enjoyed it. And thank you to all of our sponsors for both supporting us and for believing in the work that we do. Tonight, we're extremely pleased to welcome Senator Booker and Mayor Stack, and happy that they're able to participate. And we're especially happy to welcome Matthew Desmond as our featured speaker. I know you'll find what they have to say both interesting and inspiring. Of course, the reason we're here tonight is to express our deep appreciation for the work that our volunteers do. That's especially true this year. I think everybody agrees and understands that this was a year like no other. Many people have understandably turned inward during the crisis, but we're here tonight to honor a group of people who are also thinking about how they can help others through the crisis. We want you to know that we're extremely grateful for your dedication and commitment to the cause of equal justice for all. We truly appreciate what you do. And I have to add, as we all know, that the crisis is not over yet. In fact, in many ways, the legal crisis is in its early stages, with court moratoriums still in effect or only partially lifted. This means that your contribution of time and energy in the future will be even more important, and that the impact that you're going to have on the lives of low-income people in our counties will be even greater. We hope that you'll continue this fight with us. If you've not already signed up for our pro bono program, now would be a good time to do so. We definitely need you. And once again, I want to thank everybody who's participated in our program in the past. We really appreciate everything that you do on behalf of low-income people in our service area. Now let me turn to Cindy, who's going to tell you what's planned for the rest of the evening. And once again, I want to tell you thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Jack. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Northeast New Jersey Legal Services Pro Bono Celebration. My name is Cindy Cuesta, and I'm the Pro Bono Director here at Northeast New Jersey Legal Services. Although it's disappointing that we can't be together in person, we have a truly inspiring evening lined up. After messages from our state leaders, we'll have a live Q&A session with Matthew Desmond, followed by a ceremony to honor our volunteers. I'm so grateful to everyone who's made this evening happen. From my incredible pro bono team, Jack, Nisha, Miriam, Evelyn, Lisette, to each one of my compassionate, brilliant colleagues here at NNJLS. And to the sponsors for this evening, thank you. Your belief and trust in our work allows us to serve more people every day. Tonight, we honor our volunteers. It's National Pro Bono Week this week, and it's an annual celebration that brings us all together to shine light on the impact and power of volunteering. It cannot be emphasized enough. We could not serve as many people who want to keep a roof over their heads, people who want to be safe, people who want to start over, without our volunteers. I know it's not an easy task, and I'm in constant awe of each of you. Tonight, we give special honors to a few of our volunteers, John and his firm, Anna Maria, Rosemarie, William, and our two Jameses. Let's raise a virtual glass for each of them. Each of them have stood out this year in their commitment to pro bono and willingness to serve. And we need our volunteers, now more than ever. The events of this past year have unmoored us from our expectations of the world. The pandemic has transformed our daily lives. The movement for racial justice has been reignited. And the upcoming U.S. presidential election, only 1 week away, can feel alternatively hope-filled and uncertain. Never has Northeast New Jersey's mandate to serve those most in need with expertise and with compassion been more needed. And I'm hopeful. Our volunteers didn't completely ignore our calls and emails during the pandemic to take on legal cases or to assist with clinics, even as you manage your own practices and personal health. Thank you so much for your continued support. You are helping each of us remember our obligations to one another, especially in challenging moments of upheaval. Now is the time to dig in, reach toward each other, and stand up together. And now, it's with deep privilege, honor, and joy that I welcome State Senator Brian P. Stack to our virtual stage. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll see you later.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I would first like to start off by saying that I'd like to congratulate the attorneys at Northeast Legal Services, all the pro bono work that they do on a daily basis, the commitment that they make to the community. As a mayor and a state senator, I see firsthand what they do for the residents in the county that I represent in the Senate, and also as mayor of Union City, and the great work they do on a daily basis. Words could never express or thank them for the work that they do. I remember going back many years ago, long before I was a public official, I was just a tenant advocate and activist in the community. And I would drive tenants down to Jersey City to Hudson County Legal Services, where I'd see people like Larry Sindoni, Greg Debo, and so many other attorneys who were daily helped those who need it the most. Most of these residents would never have any type of an attorney had it not been for Northeast Legal Services and the great work that their attorneys do. I grew up in an apartment building as a young child with parents as superintendents, and I learned at an early age how important it was to help others that are in need. Northeast Legal Services practice that, their attorneys practice that on a daily basis, day in and day out. I remember years ago in the 1990s, I went to a Supreme Court argument where Chase Manhattan Bank was evicting tenants in New Jersey at no fault of their own due to foreclosure proceedings. And it was Legal Services of New Jersey that stopped all that and made it right, where tenants wouldn't be evicted for no fault of their own. And now during the pandemic and everything that we're going through, their services are needed even more. You have my commitment as a mayor and as a state senator. I'll continue to do more and more I can in Trenton to bring back funding that legal services needs. More importantly, I'd like to thank the great work in my own home county of Hudson County Legal Services and Northeast Legal Services. I know it's all one organization, but specifically Greg Debo, who's a wealth of knowledge, who's a person that could have went anywhere, to any law firm and probably earned 5, 6, 7 times what he makes, but is truly committed to the residents. And that's the case of every attorney at Legal Services. So my hat goes off to each of you. Any way I could ever be of assistance in any of my roles, I will definitely be there to help you. Thank you very much. Thank you to each and every attorney who's in that office today and who's been in that office over the period of time, who's made the commitment and has done tremendous work for the residents of this state. Words alone, like I said, could never thank you for what you've done. I can't say enough how much I respect you and the great caliber of attorneys that are in that office. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce someone who needs no introduction, who fights for the residents of this state every single day in the United States Senate, and that's my friend and United States Senator Cory Booker. Thank you.
Hi, this is United States Senator Cory Booker, and I just want to first thank Jack and Cindy for inviting me to speak, and congratulations for your transformation grant for, frankly, for your pro bono work with the Legal Service Corporation. And I just want to thank also all those who are involved in the pro bono partnerships team at Northeast New Jersey Legal Services for all that you all are doing. I am just one of those folks who in my entire career, since I was starting out as a young law student coming into New Jersey, coming back home to New Jersey, I saw in my earliest days the profound differences that legal services is making. And now here we are, some 20 plus years since I began my career, that we are in the midst of a pandemic and an economic crisis, as well as a lot of racial reckoning going on. And I know it is this group of committed people to understanding that you cannot have the fundamental things within our society, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, without an activist, legal profession, people coming together, committed to doing for those who are struggling or facing untold obstacles or injustices. I'm grateful for your work. I am so grateful for Legal Services of New Jersey, and I am committed to continuing to do everything I can to support your work as you support others. I am a big believer in this idea that justice in our nation is not automatic or inevitable. It must be worked for, serviced, nurtured, and nourished. You all are doing that. You all are light workers, and I am deeply, deeply grateful. You will help us get through these difficult days.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Senator Booker, for your inspiring message. My name is Gregory Diebold, and I'm the Director of Litigation here at Northeast New Jersey Legal Services. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for the evening and to acknowledge the hard work of our pro bono team. And of course, thank you to our volunteers, with special gratitude and congratulations to our 5 honorees. I'm honored tonight to introduce our featured speaker, Matthew Desmond. And I'm going to have to look down and read Matthew's bio because it's so extensive and so impressive that I want to make sure I get everything in. Matthew is the Maurice P. During Professor of Sociology at Princeton University. After receiving his PhD in 2010 from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, he joined the Harvard Society of Fellows. He is the author of 4 books, including Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City, which won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Critics Circle Award, the Carnegie Medal, and PEN John Kenneth Galbraith Award for Nonfiction. He is the principal investigator of the Eviction Lab. Desmond's research focuses on poverty in America, city life, housing insecurity, public policy, racial inequality, and ethnography. He is the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Fellowship, the American Bar Association's Silver Gravel Award, and the William Julius Wilson Early Career Award. A contributing writer for the New York Times Magazine, Mr. Desmond was listed in 2016 by Politico as one of the 50 people across the country who are most influencing the national political debate. Matthew, thank you for agreeing to be here as our featured speaker tonight and for leading this important discussion. I know all of us here have many questions and can't wait to hear from you. So at this point, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you all for having me. Thank you so much for Jack and Cindy for this invitation. Thank you so much for all the work that you do at Legal Services, often on behalf of those who would be really in a tough place and without your work and dedication. So I'm grateful for your work. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you tonight, even if it's virtually. I think I might just kind of, I've been asked to give a little talk, and I think I might just give a little talk about the state of the housing crisis in today's America, and then really looking forward to a conversation with you all. Usually we get cocktails after my talk, but I'm glad we're doing that before. Maybe the Q&A will be a bit more lively than other times. So we're in this very hard place right now, I think, as a country, and it feels like a pressure cooker, closing in. But I also think it's important during these times to remember these just long enduring problems that the country is facing. And, we're the richest democracy with the worst poverty. That's just what America is. And that's something that's long bothered me. I know it bothers many of you on this call, and I wanted to understand the role that housing played in that story. And that's how I got started studying eviction. I started, looking into this problem in 2008. I moved into a mobile home park on the south side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I lived in an inner city rooming house on the north side of the city. And I met families getting evicted, and I went everywhere with those families. I went to eviction court with them, spent nights with them in their homes, followed them into shelters, churches. And then I spent a lot of time with their landlords too, trying to figure out the business side of the housing crisis. And like to surround those kind of personal narratives, I collected a lot of statistics on the problem and really tried to get big data to be in a conversation with the small data, the things I was seeing on the ground every day, and the things I know you see on the ground every day in your important work. And so one way to tell this story about what millions of Americans are facing with this housing crisis before coronavirus, and certainly more during it now, is through one person's story that I wrote about in the book, and that's Arlene's story. So Arlene had a 14-year-old son named Jory, and one day he was just like cutting up, throwing snowballs at passing cars, and he smacked this car with a snowball, and it jerked to a stop, and this man jumped out angry. And Jory ran inside and he locked the door, but the man followed him there, and he busted the door out, kicked the door in. And thank God he left before anything else happened. But when Arlene's landlord found out about that, she decided to evict Arlene and the boys for damaging property. So Arlene took her two sons, Jory and Jafaris was 6 at the time, to the Salvation Army homeless shelter, which everyone in Milwaukee just calls the lodge. So you can tell your kids, like, we're staying at the lodge tonight, like it's a hotel. And from there, they were on the hunt for another place to live. And they found a place on 19th Street, but there was no water. And Jory often had to bucket out what was in the toilet. But Arlene told me, look, it was $5.25 for a whole house, and it was quiet. It was my favorite place. So when we looked at survey data we collected and we asked what happens to families after they get evicted, one thing that we found is they move into much worse housing than they lived in before. So if we want to know why some families live with like no heat, no water, lead paint, it's because they're forced to accept those kinds of conditions in the harried aftermath of an eviction. So the city eventually found that place unfit for human habitation, and they boarded up the windows and the doors, and Arlene and the boys were on the hunt for another place to live. And so Arlene told Jory, we take whatever we could get. And what they could get was a drab apartment complex on 13th Street and Keefe. And there was a fist-sized hole in the living room window, and the carpet was just filthy and ground in. But you know, Arlene put on a good face. She hung up curtains, she took a piece of cloth, and she stuffed in that hole in the window. So the rent for that kind of a place, which is located in a very poor neighborhood in Milwaukee, which is our 4th poorest city in America, the rent was $550 a month, utilities not included, and that took 88% of Arlene's welfare check. And she knew that she would have to like sell her food stamps to make rent, and her and the boys would go buy on oodles and noodles. When you're paying like 80% of your income on rent, there's no extra money for anything, like toys for Jory or books for Jafaris. When you're in that kind of situation, eviction isn't the result of like irresponsibility. It's more like inevitability. So how did we get to this place? So for the past 20 years, incomes for many Americans have been flat. If you live in a lot of parts of the country, you've seen your real income fall over the last 20 years, but your housing costs have soared, and rents and other housing costs have soared all over the country. They soared on the East Coast and the West Coast, soared in the South, they soared in the Midwest. Over the last 20 years, median rents have doubled in America. And so there's this growing gap, right, between what families are bringing in, what they're making in wages, and what they have to pay for just basic shelter needs. And the federal government really hasn't stepped up to fill that gap. You know, only about 1 in 4 families who apply for housing assistance receive it. And the vast majority, the unlucky majority, receive nothing, no help from federal, state, or local governments when it comes to public housing or Section 8 or any kind of way to make rent. So those are the 3 ingredients that have created the housing crisis, you know, and the crisis has got so bad to the point that today, the majority of renting families below the poverty line are spending over half of their income on housing costs, and about 1 in 4 of those families are spending over 70% of their income just on rent and utilities. So on 13th Street, Arlene found this bucket of paint and brushes and gave the walls a fresh coat. but not long after moving in, her sister died, and she pitched in some money for the funeral. She didn't have the money, but no one else did either. She just gave out of love. The next month, she missed an appointment with her welfare caseworker because the letter announcing the appointment was mailed to one of the other addresses she was evicted from. And so her caseworker sanctioned her, cut her check. And by that time, Arlene fell 2 months behind in rent, and she got the pink papers, the eviction summons. So Milwaukee, Wisconsin is a city of about 105,000 renter homes. Every year in Milwaukee, landlords evict 16,000 people. That's about 40 evictions a day. If you look only in the inner city of Milwaukee, about 1 in 14 homes is evicted every single year. It's an incredible amount of instability. But that's not even the half of it. You know, these numbers only reflect formal court-issued evictions. And there are other ways, cheaper and quicker ways for landlords to get you out. So I met a landlord that would pay you $200 and let you use his van if you're out by Sunday. I met a landlord that would, take your door off if you're behind. So we designed a way to capture all those informal evictions that never go to the inside of a courtroom. And if you add those up with formal evictions that are legally counted and building condemnations and landlord foreclosures, you learn that 1 in 8 renters in Milwaukee is evicted every 2 years, 1 in 8. Half of those evictions are informal evictions. So how weird is Milwaukee? Is it an outlier? Does it evict a lot of people, a regular amount of people? For a long time, we had no way to answer those questions. The federal government doesn't collect national data on evictions. So we did. We started a group at Princeton called the Eviction Lab. And our mission has been to build the first ever national database of eviction in this country. So what have we learned? We've learned that in an average year, about 3.7 million evictions are filed all across America. That's about 7 evictions filed a minute throughout this country. That means the amount of evictions filed every year, just on average, is more than the foreclosure starts, even at the very height of the foreclosure crisis. We learned that eviction isn't highest in cities like Boston or New York or San Francisco, cities with the highest housing cost. Evictions are highest in places like Richmond, Virginia, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have to be talking about these cities when it comes to the housing crisis. It's also not just a big city problem either. This is something that's affecting rural communities and suburban communities. The eviction crisis, it's not a coastal issue. It's not a red state or blue state issue. This is a national issue. This is a problem that affects the sick and the able-bodied, the young and the old. But as you know from your work, the face of our eviction epidemic is moms with kids. Until recently, the housing court in the South Bronx literally had a daycare inside of it because there were so many kids coming through its doors. And low-income African-American women like Arlene, and moms in particular, are evicted at incredibly high rates. Among Milwaukee renters, 1 in 5 Black women is evicted sometime in her life, compared to 1 in 15 white women. I think that's a statistic that should trouble us because it means that eviction is something like the equivalent of incarceration for Black women. Many low-income African-American men are being locked up, far too many. And far too many low-income African-American women are being locked out. They're disproportionately bearing the brunt of the eviction crisis. So Arlene went to eviction court, and is court custom in Milwaukee. She got to stay 2 extra days for each of her 2 kids. And those days came and went, and she was asked to be out on a day in early January, ordered to be out, I should say. Early January is very cold in Milwaukee, but if she waited any longer, the sheriff would arrive with a judge's order and a sidearm, and they would have piled everything on the sidewalk. You know, the meat cuts in the freezer, the shower curtain, Jafar's asthma machine. So Arlene struck out into the cold, and once again, she was on the hunt for another place to live. And so she called on or applied to 20 apartments, and then 40, and then 60, and then 80. I counted. She was accepted to none of them. Even in the inner city, many were out of reach. And the place she could afford, she basically threw everything she had at the rent, weren't calling back either. And part of the reason, besides her poverty, was her eviction notice, her eviction record. You know, as you know, an eviction record is a mark, it's a blemish, and it can follow you around. And this is one of the reasons why it took Arlene so long to find subsequent housing, because a lot of property owners were seeing that record and saying no. So finally, the 90th landlord, Mr. 90, said yes. He had a one-bedroom apartment, it was $525 a month. Arlene didn't much consider the conditions of the place, what the neighborhood was like. A house is a house, she told Jory. So 2 months after their eviction court hearing, they moved in. And Arlene quite liked it. You know, all the lights worked, all the cabinets had fixtures. So she got her stuff out of storage. She hung pictures on the wall. She liked things neat. So she hung a little sign over the sink of Jory that said, you know, if you don't clean up after yourself, we're going to have problems. So Jory's 14, right? And he's experiencing these stretches of homelessness. Between 7th and 8th grades, Jory goes to 5 different schools. And at his new school, he starts acting out a bit. And a teacher one day yells at him. And he gets really embarrassed, like shamed, humiliated. And he kicks her in the shin. And he runs home. And the teacher called the principal, but then she thought it was appropriate to call the police. And when officers visited Jory and Arlene at that new apartment that Arlene just nabbed, and when the landlord saw that visit, he told her she had to go. You know, the kids, kids can prolong the time you're homeless after you're evicted, and they often are the reason you get evicted. We did a study in eviction court when we asked, like, when does this family get evicted and this family doesn't, even though they owe the landlord the same amount of money. What made the difference wasn't race, it wasn't gender, it was kids. The chance of you getting an eviction judgment triple, all else equal, if you live with kids. And what you're seeing in that statistical finding is just landlord discretion. Landlord saying, I'll work with you, but not with you. So after that eviction, Arlene started to unravel a little bit. She told me, it's like I got a curse on me. It won't stop for nothing. You know, we found that moms who get evicted experience higher rates of depression 2 years later. We know that suicides attributed to evictions doubled between 2005 and 2010, years where the American housing market was out of control. You know, Arlene went on to tell me, just my soul is messed up. I wish my life were different. I wish that when I'm an old lady, I can sit back and look at my kids and they are grown and they become something more than me. And we'll all be together and be remembering stuff like this and be laughing at it. The work that y'all do is so important because the home is the center of life. It's our refuge from work and school. During this global pandemic, it's our refuge from disease, even death. We say that at home we're ourselves, everywhere else we remove our masks. In languages spoken all over the world, the word for home encompasses not just shelter, but like community, warmth, the womb. In ancient Egypt, the hieroglyph for home is the same one for mother. Eviction causes loss. Families lose their homes, kids lose their schools, you lose your neighborhood and kind of local ties. You often lose your stuff, your possessions, which are piled on the street to be scavenged or taken by movers. It takes a good amount of money, time to build a home, and eviction can just delete all that. An eviction comes with this mark, this formal mark, or this court record, which can prevent you from moving into safe neighborhoods and in good housing. And it can also prevent you from moving into public housing, because many of our public housing authorities, even though they don't have to, count eviction as a mark against your application, which means we're systematically denying housing help to the families that need it the most. So we push those families into slum housing, and we push those families into bad neighborhoods. We have studies that show that eviction causes job loss. And if any of you on this call have been evicted, you know why. It's such a consuming, drawn out event. It can cause you to make mistakes at work, lose your footing in the labor market. And then there's the effect that eviction has on your soul or your mental health. And so I think when we add all that up, we have to conclude that evictions, which used to be rare in the United States, which used to draw crowds, they're not just a condition of poverty, they're also a cause of poverty. They are making things worse, and they are leaving a deep and jagged scar on the next generation, which means we can't fix poverty, we can't boost social mobility, we can't decrease inequality if we don't fix housing. So I just want to conclude by just saying, you know, whatever your issue is, whatever keeps you up at night, whether it's racial inequality, health, education, fiscal spending, being smart with our tax dollars, whatever keeps you up at night, the lack of affordable housing sits somewhere at the root of that issue, because like without stable shelter, everything else falls apart. So thanks for listening, and really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Matthew. I just wanted to start off the Q&A, give some people some time to think about questions, and then I'll unmute everyone. But I was kind of wondering, what is your perspective on New Jersey? And is it the same, or what are there unique challenges to the area that we work in?
So I think that, you know, New Jersey has some unique strengths and challenges. As a, you know, New Jersey is a high cost state. When we think of what we've heard in the last 2 months about the extra benefits from unemployment insurance being higher than what workers usually take home, that's not true. That wasn't true in New Jersey, and it wasn't true in New York and Colorado and other very high cost states. And so I think that the proximity of New Jersey to a lot of major metro areas puts a unique squeeze on the housing market. I think that the legal aid framework and strength in New Jersey is quite strong, and I think it provides tenants access to legal protections which they don't exist in other parts of the country. I also think New Jersey has had a uneven acceptance of certain rights extended to tenants. So Newark has followed New York City in adopting a right to counsel measure in eviction court. I think that, but they're not apples to apples, actually. I think that what you saw in New York gives you a different set of rights and protections for tenants than the kind that Newark adopted. So I guess that's my quick shot on our home state.
I had a question about what your book was about, the economic crisis, and what are the parallels with COVID-19 right now? What do you feel is different in this current, economic crisis that we're experiencing?
Well, I think what's different is the scope and depth of the cut. The unemployment levels that we saw in 2008 and 2009 were quite startling. The unemployment levels we have seen in the last 8 months have been historic. We haven't seen these kind of levels of unemployment since the Great Depression, so almost 100 years. I think we've also seen a level of tenant organizing during this time that we also haven't seen to the degree and to the level of energy that we haven't seen since the eviction blockades of the Great Depression either. I think the recovery from this crisis is going to be slower. It seems that Congress has not fully learned the lessons of federal stimulus that we learned 10 years ago, which is like spend big and spend quickly, and don't worry about saving water when the building's on fire. The fact that the Senate adjourned this month without another stimulus is going to bring a lot of pain to families across the United States. I also think that the big question from an eviction or housing crisis standpoint for renters is what happens on January 1st when that eviction moratorium lifts. Are property owners going to reach for eviction notices quickly, or are we going to see something of more of a compromise at a national level? And I think that the jury's really still out, but there's a ton of rental debt that just hasn't been paid, and there's been inaction from Congress on that score as well.
Okay, we have some questions coming in. I'm going to start with the Q&A box from Mike Novak, who works at NNJLS. Attorneys at NNJLS and elsewhere do a lot to help people facing eviction, but many people facing eviction do not have a legal defense, e.g. non-payment of rent, where they simply don't have the money. what is the benefit of the right to counsel for people who just need money? How would you propose helping those people?
So if you look at studies on the effect of lawyers in eviction court, one thing that is very clear is that the effect of a lawyer on keeping people in their home is huge and significant, irrespective of the merits of the case. Now, I think that many of these studies have been done in places like Massachusetts and New York, where the law does provide certain kind of legal defenses. But I do think also that having a lawyer, even when people are behind, can keep people in their home in a way that they just couldn't if they were out there to face their landlord's attorney or the property owner alone. That said, Mike is right in the fact that, like, this intervention doesn't address the root cause of the problem, which is like the fact that, most renting families below the poverty line are spending most of their income on housing costs. So what do we do about that problem? So in the book, I conclude in a very simple policy measure. It's basically you take a program that we already have that works pretty darn well, which is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and expand it to everyone below the poverty line. Everyone who qualifies for the program would actually benefit from the program. This essentially is Joe Biden's housing plan now. And I think it's politically feasible. I think it would be a game changer. And I think that that it's something we can do to just invest more deeply in the housing crisis. I think that without serious federal investment, we're not going to make huge steps forward in terms of the crisis, addressing the crisis.
This leads to Peter's question, who also works at NNJLS. Why has the federal government been so hesitant to offer more funds towards supporting public housing in recent years?
So it used to be the case that the federal government's budget went like this: Department of Defense, HUD. It used to be the case that the second biggest budget line for the federal government was in fact housing. And there was a massive investment after World War II, and this kind of lead up got us through to President Reagan. And President Reagan slashed funding for housing by 60%, 60%. And that caused a very public policy failure. That caused these giant towers that we had built in St. Louis and Atlanta and Chicago to fall into disrepair and become just blemishes on the American city. And so public housing wasn't a bad idea. It was made to fail. And I think that we haven't got over that that very blunt fact at the federal level. I also think we can't talk about that question without just talking about racism and systemic racism. And I think that public housing somewhere along the way got coded in racial terms, racialized terms. And when it did, I think that you did see a federal disinvestment in a way that has been massively harmful to families. And so I think that, I think those are two ways to answer your question. I do think that, I'm cautiously optimistic that the pendulum is swinging the other way. I think that the housing crisis has been climbing up the national agenda. I think the fact that people, at least on one side of the ticket, that are running for president have to have a housing plan is very different than what we saw 10 or 15 years ago with major democratic issues. So I do think that federal lawmakers are taking this crisis more seriously as the crisis itself has gotten worse.
Okay, the next question is from Larry Sidoni, who also works for NNJLS. Do you have any ideas for minimizing the barriers to re-renting caused by landlord credit check reports, court records on eviction files?
So I'm not sure what the barriers to, I'm not sure how it works in New Jersey, so forgive me if I'm repeating something that we already have, but in some states like California and Washington and Oregon, there are eviction cases are sealed. In California, I believe your eviction case isn't publicly available or available to tenant screening companies for 6 months after your eviction crisis, allowing families to kind of relocate before that blemish really hits them. I think that if eviction court was even and fair and both parties had a say, I think that there would be an argument for keeping the records open. But eviction court in most areas of the country is not like that, and, in Charlotte, North Carolina, there's about 100 eviction cases per hour because the commissioners know that most people aren't going to show up. Phoenix, Arizona, 90% of landlords are represented by attorneys, 90% of tenants aren't. So in those kind of situations, the records aren't necessarily a reflection of a fair legal process. They're a record of an eviction processing plan. So I think that there are cases for limiting access and making access a little harder, especially if kind of the open records really can have tangible negative effects on tenants.
That leads into a question we've had in the Q&A box. Has there been significant mobilization to expunge, seal people's eviction records? Are there any good examples of such laws?
I think the best example of the laws are states, it's kind of like insurance buy-in policies, if you say as an employer, you're all bought into this kind of savings plan, let us know if you want to opt out. That has much higher take-up rates than if you say, let us know if you want to opt in into the savings plan. And so I think that states that actually proactively give tenants kind of blanket protections are much more successful at that than states that basically put the onus on the tenants to try to expunge the records. We just did an evaluation of national eviction records and published a study, and there are a lot of errors in those records too. People are duplicated eviction records, people that didn't get evicted, it looks like they did in the records. And so a lot of tenants, I think, even if they win their case, in real life, can lose it on paper in a way that they don't even know and recognize. So some other kind of way of accountability and transparency and accuracy that's built into the core record system is sorely needed as well.
We have a bunch of questions. Okay, Greg, also from NNJLS, asked, we think our job is to prevent our clients' evictions. Should we be doing more for clients post-eviction? And if so, what?
Oh, I'm too, that's above my pay grade to tell you what your job is. I think that you guys have a really hard job already. I think that there are, it's so interesting to think of like, what is the role of kind of a full service legal aid provision, not only before, but after the eviction as well. One thing the question kind of brings to mind is, the right policy for the right people. And I remember looking into a program called Home Start in Boston, and they prevent evictions in affordable housing and in public housing in Boston. And they do three little things. They provide legal assistance of a year's worth of wraparound services and pay off some arrears. And it costs about $4,000 a case. And, my question when I learned about that service is, okay, if you help in January, March comes quick, is it just kind of a stopgap measure prolonging the inevitable? But if you evaluate the program, it shows that, over 85% of families who receive the intervention are housed 5 years later, that you really can intervene in a way and put families on a more stable path than they would in a way that's actually cheaper to do than to evict the family, at least through public housing and public means. And so it might suggest that, the legal services combined with like a light touch kind of wraparound service could go a long way to families. Now, these are families in affordable housing, right? So these aren't families like Arlene that are paying 80% of their income on rent. But I think that identifying families that like a shallow intervention could go a long way, and then a deeper intervention could do something more, I think could be important. Can I just say one more thing on this, Nisha? I don't mean to be long-winded. So one bee in my bonnet lately is, there's also a lot of need for thinking about other kinds of ways to address this question, namely putting the focus not on the tenants, but on the property owners. You know, in his novel There, the novelist Tommy Orange has this amazing scene where this gentleman's talking about Native American suicides and kid suicide, youth suicides. And he says, it's like these kids are jumping out of the burning building and we think that the problem is they're jumping. And I think that a lot of us who do this kind of work, it's kind of, that's like, how can we fix the jumping? How can we adjust the jumping? But we also can ask different kinds of questions about like, who lit the building on fire? And like, those questions are like, who's the biggest evictor in Newark? How do we know that is true? What would it mean to sit down with or do an intervention with the 10 highest evicting buildings in a city? So, you know, when we think about explaining eviction, we often focus on things like race, they have kids, you know, those kind of things, but people aren't evicting themselves. Someone's doing the evicting. And so what would it mean to have a new kind of legal aid that actually takes that perspective and tries to insert more accountability and transparency and maybe a target or more precise intervention than just a blanket intervention? So one idea quickly, so Rochester, New York did this little change in their laws where they say, like, if you're going to evict someone, you just have to use your real name, like the name, like your birth name. No more company names, LLCs, like you as a person have to be evicting someone. It's just a way Rochester is kind of paying attention to who's doing the displacement in their city.
That is really interesting. We have a lot of questions coming in. So I think I just want to be very cognizant of time. So I'm going to get through a couple more and then maybe we'll do a few from the Q&A box. Brian, also who works for NNJLS, asks, my question would be, what is your opinion to the supply side argument? i.e., we need to upzone and create more housing. Some feel this is just a chance to build for the luxury market and leads to gentrification, but is there clearly a need for more building?
Some places yes, and some places no. So nationwide, rental vacancy rates actually have increased over the last 10 years as rents have increased. And there's cities like Tulsa, Oklahoma has 18% vacancy. Houston has 15%. Tucson has 11% vacancy rates. There are plenty of cities with plenty of supply, and we still see these big eviction numbers. You know, Indianapolis, you know, going to cities in South Carolina, these are high evicting cities with plenty of supply. And so I think that in those kind of cities, the supply side argument really feels flat, feels false. And then other cities, especially those, you know, in northern New Jersey, New York, you know, in the Bay Area, more housing is desperately needed, actual built housing. Now, the studies on this, you're right, like the evidence is really mixed. You know, some studies show that if you build more housing, it doesn't really pay to build for low to moderate income families. And so you build for the luxury market, you hope that trickles down. So some studies show that it does trickle down, but not very far. You know, it kind of trickles down to the middle class. The middle class end up paying a little less as renters. And other studies show that it does kind of have a market-wide effect. But the idea that supply is our answer to the housing crisis just doesn't align with the data literally in most cities in America.
That's interesting. And I'm going to skip to the Q&A box really quick because it's a different type of question, but what has been the biggest challenges in collecting data about evictions? What's the status of what you have been able to garner about evictions as a whole in New Jersey? And perhaps what are the biggest gaps in knowledge?
I think that such a big question. I think that I'll take the easy parts or the smaller parts first, where it's like, so we've been able to build a national eviction data set. We have about 100 million eviction records going back to 2000. It's all on our website, evictionlab.org. It certainly isn't perfect. You know, we don't have every single eviction record. It's not standardized across the United States. You know, there's not one single place that does this. And so one challenge we're facing is like, you know, it shouldn't be up to like this little ragtag group of, data crunchers to build this thing that I think is of like paramount national importance. It should be up to the federal government to do this. I think that's been a challenge. But I do think, just going back to my like property owner question, that's a new challenge in and of itself. Who owns Newark? What can we learn from people that are renting in very poor neighborhoods and doing no evictions? Who are those people? What can we learn from them? Who are the people that are responsible for the bulk of our displacement? We started trying to crack this code, which takes a lot of cracking because there's a lot of corporate shells and LLCs out there. We started cracking this code in Boston, and we learned that the top 10 people, not 10 companies, just 10 people, evict 15% of the city. If the top 50 people, 50, evict about a third of the city. So does Boston need more supply? Sure. Could it use some more housing vouchers? Sure. But can't we like get those 50 people in a room and do something targeted? I think that could have a bigger effect. So I think that on the data and eviction side of things, I think there's massive challenges to just maintaining the database. But on the public policy side of things, I think there are challenges in trying to deeply understand the main actors in this story, which are the property owners.
There's one question from Adelina, also NNJLS. Have you ever given a presentation to a group where someone strongly disagreed with the message in your book? If so, what did they disagree with? How did you respond, and what did you learn from that experience?
So there's a lot of disagreement. There's an active debate about what we want to see, where we want to go as a country with respect to housing. For a chunk of the population, housing's working pretty well. For homeowners, housing seems to be an okay bargain. There's massive tax breaks. One of the best tax cutouts in the code is the mortgage interest deduction. For many of us, it's a wealth builder. And so the idea of kind of rethinking the system sometimes hits some folks as anathema. But I do think that's starting to change. I do think that people are not only starting to see a massive crisis for a third of the country, but to understand that crisis is like unfair, and understand that their tax breaks and their schools and their neighborhoods are not just different from other people's, but like are bound up in the same society, which means like some people's, there are winners and losers, and there are losers because there are winners in the American American state. I think that, there's an interesting debate on the left about decommodifying housing, getting past the idea of housing as a commodity. So when I suggest things like housing vouchers, for example, some housing organizers push back against that idea. They say, wait a minute, like that's just further affirm the commodification of housing. How can we get over that? I think that's an interesting thing to consider and wrestle with. The reason that I concluded that in my book is because scale. And I wanted to offer the biggest idea to help the most people. But I think there is a really interesting conversation going out there trying to reimagine what housing would look like if it wasn't for wealth building, if it wasn't for speculating, if it was just for living. What would that look like? And then more on the right, I think that there are real hesitations sometimes with the idea of public housing as a good investment. But it turns out we've learned from our sins and mistakes of the past. And kids that grow up in public housing today, for example, they do better than kids that grow up in the private market. Families who receive a housing voucher after years on the waiting list do one consistent thing with their freed up income, which is buy more food. Their kids become healthier and stronger and less anemic. And so I think that I think there's plenty of debates. The question about what I've learned from these debates, it's really a hard thing to answer in just like a short amount of time. But I just wrote a story for the New York Times Magazine on tenants in Minneapolis who had organized for years and years and years against their landlord, and actually bought their building back from the landlord and are turning it into a cooperative. And reporting on that story was pretty convicting for me, because I think I had been focused so much on trying to change federal policy that I had lost sight a little bit of the really amazing work going on the ground level by tenants themselves. And there's a line in the piece where a tenant kind of is trying to put herself in other people's shoes who are watching their movement. And she says, I bet these people are asking, why do these tenants want this rundown building? It's because they've forgotten how to dream. They've forgotten how to dream. And, you know, it was kind of a line where I'd ask myself, have I forgotten how to dream? And I think that was a point of conviction, a point of challenge for me personally.
I think we have time for one more. You have to leave at 6:30, correct?
Yeah.
I think one more. It's Edgar, also with NNJLS. The main opposition to expanding the housing choice voucher plan is increased cost to the taxpayer. But as you mentioned before, homelessness has a massive cost to the individual, but also to society. Have you been able to study the net financial cost benefit should we expand housing assistance?
So there are plenty of studies like the Housing First studies that come out of the University of Pennsylvania, that came out of Utah, that show that, you know, just giving folks with chronic homelessness, even if they have serious mental illness, even if they are addicted to serious substances, those interventions can really, those are cost effective. You know, those are much cheaper than trying to triage the problem. You know, the top 5% of hospital users consume half of all hospital ER costs. So who are they? They're people that are unstably housed with serious medical conditions. That's why the nonprofit health sector has started investing more in affordable housing. It's a double bottom line for them. They realize that it saves them money to do so, and it promotes public health. I think that I think there is a real serious financial case that you can make, especially given the fact that many people around the country are evicted for very small amounts of money. So about a third of all evictions nationwide are for less than a month's worth of rent. So that means, like, if you take a state like Virginia, about 1 in 10 evictions in Virginia are for less than $335. So triaging the fallout of an eviction for a family in Virginia is much more costly than $335. And so I think that you're right. I think the math works out. And that's one of the reasons I think we do have bipartisan support for an expansion of vouchers. There was a bill introduced in the Senate in December, which feels like a million years ago, but it was just in December. That was a $500,000 expansion of housing vouchers, which had support from the Republicans and the Democrats. And so, I think that you know, times are changing, even in a really polarized, gridlocked political structure.
Okay, I don't want to keep you, but thank you so much. We do have more questions, but I feel like you've hit kind of the main points on most of them. And I know you have to leave, but so thank you so much for coming and talking to us and sharing your insights with us. I think we all feel enriched after that conversation, and hopefully more motivated to keep, you know, protecting our clients.
Thanks for all you do, especially during this incredibly crazy time. And I wish you all well. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Cindy Lou, for inviting me and welcoming me here to this wonderful celebration. And thank you, Matthew Desmond. Matt, what a great job you've done We're really grateful for you sharing your perspective and answering our questions this evening. The research of the Eviction Lab and the advocacy of people facing homelessness is imperative to what's going on in today's world and for our clientele, particularly as we face what's going to be a true uphill battle with once we come out of the regulations preventing evictions in New Jersey. We're going to be swamped, and all the help that you've given is really great. We have to keep having these conversations, and we appreciate your availability to help us in that regard. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Cindy and our wonderful staff at Northeast New Jersey Legal Services for putting this program together, and more importantly, for all the work that you do at Northeast New Jersey Legal Services to coordinate pro bono attorneys who do so much great work on behalf of our clients and community, necessary private work that we couldn't otherwise do in-house. We are here tonight to celebrate all the volunteers that are so necessary for our community. And on behalf of myself and the other members of the board, we really appreciate all the work that you are doing and have done over the years. We can't do it ourselves, and the community really needs all the help we can get, particularly in these hard times. I note that my first introduction to legal services was as a pro bono attorney back in the 1990s. And after that work that I did with the attorneys and legal services on a particular piece of litigation, I was asked by the then executive director, Tim Madden, to come on board as the president, as the then president of the organization, which was then Hudson County Legal Services, was having to leave because he had taken a job in government. It brought me on board, and I was there with Hudson County during the time of the transition to the Northeast New Jersey Legal Services with the merger of Hudson Bergen and Passaic. And what a ride it's been since the early 2000s until now. But I want to again reiterate, without the help of the private bar, without the volunteers such as the people who were on this Zoom meeting, we wouldn't be able to do all the things that we do for our clientele and the community of Hudson Bergen and Passaic. You help us bridge the justice gap with your volunteer to support all the people across the state with your guidance and help. The work each of you are doing to serve the clients is immeasurable, especially during these times. More than just the case numbers and client hours, you're helping people remain housed. You're ensuring they receive the benefits that they're entitled to and keeping families safe from violence. You're helping people take back control of their lives in a circumstance where they otherwise couldn't afford legal services. I take this opportunity to ask everybody here. I'm going to raise a glass along with you to those who still have their cocktails from the earlier mixer to toast to all of the current volunteers and those hopefully who will continue with us and more in the future. Please spread the word. We need your help. We thank you. We can't thank you enough. And to the sponsors of tonight's event, thank you for sharing in our belief in pro bono work. To the pro bono team, again, you guys work tirelessly for Northeast New Jersey Legal Services and for our community, and for the lawyers in Northeast New Jersey Legal Services who could always use the help. While we're fortunate with some recent funding to be able to increase our staffing, it's never enough to meet the needs of all the community. There's still so many people out there who need additional help, and volunteers, you help us meet that or fill that void. Please continue offering your time and experience and talents to us. And again, we invite you and to spread the word that any of your friends and colleagues who want to come on board, we can use your help. Again, I offer the virtual toast to each this evening, and congratulations again to all the volunteers and honorees that we specifically say thanks to. And now let's hear directly from some of them. Thank you again. Have a good evening.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Crespo, and I'm the Pro Bono Coordinator for the Bergen County office. I'm so excited to present this outstanding Firm Partnered Award to John Scura and his entire firm. You and your attorneys have been such incredible partners and supporters of the Northeast New Jersey Legal Services, and not even the pandemic slow anyone's commitment to the work. John, you personally have answered calls and emails when we had clients in need. Your attorneys have stepped up when we needed help with cases and clinics. For that, we thank you. Your dedication to secure justice for clients is so clear, and I've seen it in each of the attorneys that I have the pleasure of working with. I'm so happy we get to honor you and Scura Law Firm with the outstanding Firm Partner Awards. Congratulations.
Hi everyone, I'm John Scura, and our law firm Scura, Wigfield, Heyer, Stevens, and Camerota is honored to receive the Northeast New Jersey Legal Services Firm Partner Award. We are honored, and just all the great work that Northeast New Jersey Legal Services does for the community and people out there is fantastic, and we need that help, especially out there in the community with what's going on in our world right now. As a firm, we're honored to do the work. We try to do as much as we can, and it's based on our firm's principles to help others, and all of our strong faith in God that people do need the help, and we are there to help them. I've been asked to share a story with a client so I did have a client over 20 years ago. Her first name is Michelle, and it was one of the most moving experiences. She was an 18-year-old, and I helped her in a domestic violence case. And she was only 18, had a 3-year-old, and she became a friend. I've represented her in other cases over the years. Now she's in her 40s, and just was a great experience for me, and in large part that helped me know that I wanted to do more pro bono work for others. And our firm, we try to push that. And thank you again, and we're very honored.
I'm happy to award James Banks with this year's Excellence in Service Award. James has been a valued volunteer and has always been dedicated to helping our clients. We really appreciate how he has always gone the extra mile to make sure they get the best representation they can. I'm happy to virtually present you with the NNJLS Excellence in Service Award for 2020. Hi, I'm Nisha Thompson. I'm the Pro Bono Manager, and I am so happy to award Rosemarie Anderson the Commitment Award for 2020. Rosemarie has been a staple for Pro Bono. She has always been so open and available to help our clients. She took the first case I ever had to coordinate at NNJLS, and I will always appreciate how patient and committed she was, and how that helped me learn the ropes and made me really appreciate the work that we do. Thank you, Rosemarie, for your commitment, and I'm happy to virtually present you with the NNJLS Commitment Award for 2020.
you've made the decision that you want to give back to the community, then you do have to make a decision about how much of your time can you really afford to invest. Because it doesn't make sense for you to take on a case and then you can't really give it the attention that it deserves. So you have to be honest with yourself. I really can't afford a 60-hour case, right? And that can happen. And I can only afford, 10 hours in 6 months. So you take those cases that you can dedicate the time to. And there are going to be cases that not only are you dedicating time, but your finances are going in those cases. So that, you have to consider, you might not have to pay filing fees because you're coming through legal services, but there are other costs that you should consider. And you also have to consider how you will vibe, for lack of a better word, with your clients, because sometimes you get clients from a totally different background and you have to be able to work with them and not have your prejudices enter your representation. And that's true in your private practice, but I think more so when you feel like you're not getting paid for this job, you have to put the effort out to say, this is still my client and I still have the obligation to represent this person vigorously and give the best. All I can say is if you have made that commitment, just keep at it. And if you haven't made the commitment, just think about all the lives that you could impact in a positive way if you give just a few hours of your annual professional time. It doesn't require half of your practice. It doesn't require a quarter of your practice time to really make a difference in people's lives. And sometimes it's a simple consultation. You get people the information that they need and you send them off to do what they need to do. And I think that's probably one of the best things we can do. Inform our clients so that they know their rights, they understand their rights, and they can go out and be their own advocate. I'll end.
Good evening. My name is Miriam Martinez. I have been with the company for about 40 years. I have been the pro bono coordinator since 2009 for all of the counties until these lovely ladies came into the picture. No, not really. Now I am the pro bono coordinator for the Passaic County area. Since then, I have met many of you, but today I am very proud and very pleased to present the Championship of Justice Award to Mr. William Tourette. Not only is he one of the most outstanding attorneys of our pro bono volunteers, as all of you are, but his support and dedication to our NNJLS pro bono program make him stand out. Since 2011, when Mr. Tourette answered to our call to become our volunteer for the most vulnerable of our clients, he has represented many of them, and he has also empowered many of them with his wise advice on the areas of housing and consumer law. He always answers our emails, our calls, even when he is unavailable, to let us know he will always be there for our clients. I am very proud to present the Championship Justice Award from our NNJLS Pro Bono Partnership Program to Mr. William Tourette. Thank you for all you do for us, and thank you to all of you for all you continue to do.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisette Montalvo, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce this year's Champion of Justice Award to Miss Ana Maria. Thank you for your continued support in our pro bono program. We truly appreciate all your time and expertise, and I hope this afternoon everyone will have a great time.
Hi, my name is Meizys, and I am an attorney in Hackensack, New Jersey. I am very honored to be recognized for the pro bono work that I have done this year. Volunteer work to me is something that is just a part of who I am. It's something that I've always done. It is really a privilege to be able to provide assistance through pro bono work to people who might otherwise have to navigate the legal system on their own, especially in matters that are going to have such a huge impact on their lives. I feel that I have been fortunate in my life to have received help and assistance when I've needed it in various ways, and so if I can pay it forward, I will. I think the pandemic has really shown us that there is a huge divide between those people who can afford legal services and those who cannot. And it has highlighted also how important it is for there to be organizations such as Northeast New Jersey Legal Services to provide a legal representation to those who cannot afford it. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. It is my great honor and privilege to present the Rookie of the Year Award to James Browning. James, you have been fantastic this first year volunteering with us, not only with our clients, but in speaking with me and then connecting me with your colleagues as we strategize about our transformation grants and our pro bono plan of attack. I'm so glad you're a part of our guiding coalition. I hope you found as much value working with us as we've found in you as a volunteer. Congratulations.
Hi everybody, I'm James Browning. Thank you so much for recognizing me with this award. While I'm new here and I'm just starting to contribute, being recognized still means a lot to me. I joined this organization specifically because Hudson County has been my home for over 10 years. This is my community and I wanted to find a way to help take better care of my community, especially since Hudson County can often be overlooked because it's so close to New York City and lives in its shadow a little bit. So it's gratifying to hear that others think that I'm already making an impact. I need to point out that I don't think I would have been given this award had I not been invited to join the guiding coalition. Rookies like myself are often not allowed to have a voice in these kinds of conversations. So I think Cindy Lou deserves some recognition herself for not just leading the coalition, but for her willingness to include even people like me who are just starting to earn their stripes. I think that the work we all do is critically important, especially in times like these. So I'm looking forward to getting to know you all better, working together to help the people that need it the most. So thank you all very much and stay safe out there.